So let's talk about some basic navigation of these workspaces. Over here on the left, we're looking at our augmented 3D visualizer workspace. And notice it's mostly gray. Well, that's the way augmented starts out, as if to show us like a blank space. But inside this augmented 3D space, we can make a lot of changes about the way that we view what's going on inside that virtual 3D space. So you have lots of options over here about what this space is going to show me. Just so I can show you a few other things, let me first go and look at some of the light options inside this 3D space. We'll look at what all of these do throughout our learning, but for right now, notice how gray this space is. It's a little hard to see what's going on in there. It's almost as if the lights are off in the theater. The ambient light is if you're turning on work lights in your theatrical venue. So let's say that I wanted to turn all the work lights on. I could click high. Now suddenly we see that there's a figure there. We can start to see some of the hanging battens, the pipe positions over the stage, and we can see some lighting instruments that are already there for us in the space. If I want to turn down the work lights, or quote unquote the ambient lights, I can turn them down a little bit, I can turn them low, or just like in a theatrical setting, if we were rehearsing or working on lights, we would turn them off, and suddenly we would be left with a dark black stage, right? And we would always yell, going dark, really loud in the theater before we did that, right? As a safety thing. So for right now, let's turn this up on medium so that we can see what's happening. So that's one of our options over here. We can also click inside this panel and zoom around. So I'm scrolling my wheel out and I'm starting to sort of back up in the space. And as you can see, it's a pretty good size, square, sort of a black box theater space, right? It's got some height to it, it's got some width, and it's got some depth. But this is what we would call, a light lab. It's a practice space for us to play around in. So right now, I'm just scrolling backwards and forwards. If I want to move around, I can right-click and hold, and notice I can pan my camera around, like so. And I can look to the left, and I can look to the right. Or if I click Shift and right-click, I can slide the whole image from side to side. So scroll wheel helps me zoom, right-click and hold helps me orbit or swivel around, and then Shift right-click helps me sort of like move the page as if I was sliding a piece of paper up and down, side to side, etc., etc. There's also a bunch of really helpful built-in views for you. So right here underneath camera, if we open up those options, there's lots of really cool ways that we can look at the space. And if you look at these top sections here, they've already created 6 standard views of this space for you. So if I click home, notice it sort of zooms in on my figure there in the middle. So that's my actor. We can change him later, but we're going to leave him for right now. If I click 1, it's going to give me sort of a high up diagonal view, what we call an isometric view from above. If I click 2, it's going to give me a full top view, which in this case in theater we call that a plan view. So it's going to give me the PLAN, the plan view of the space. If I click on 3, he's going to swivel around to a high look from stage right. If I click on 4, it's going to swivel around to stage left and give me the high look from the side. And if I click on 5, it's going to give me a back view. And notice the back wall of the theater disappeared, but I'm seeing what's happening on the stage from the rear view. Inside any one of these views, I can then go back in and scroll wheel, zoom in, right click, orbit, or shift right click, and slide this around from side to side until I adjust my view of how I'd like to see it. And then if I ever want to reset, I can go back to home. There's my original view. I can go back to 1. I can go back to 2, blah, blah, blah. If you find a view that you really like, and I'm going to go to the home view, And I really like to see the whole stage from the audience's perspective. So I'm going to back myself out until I can see all of my lighting spaces. And then I like to rotate myself up just a little bit. Not quite as much as that high isometric view, but this kind of makes me feel like I'm looking at the stage from an audience position. This kind of gives me that I'm in the middle of the seats, midway up, in the center, looking at the stage like I might be seeing it in a performance. And I'm going to adjust it until I feel like I'm right in the center. That's how I really like to see it. If that's a view that you want to come back to over and over and over again, you can save this view. So you can click on camera and choose one of the 5 bookmarks you would like to save this. I like this much better than the high middle isometric view. So when I click on this, I'm going to press and hold it. And notice it says view updated. Now, if I go to 2, I've got the plan view. There's the high right. There's the high left. There's the back. And I updated 1 to be that view that I like to go back to over and over and over again. That's very useful to me. So that's the basic navigation of this space and moving around. We'll talk about some of these other things a little later when we get into actually focusing the lighting instruments. But just remember, you can always change your view. There's also another section here of the way you can look. There's another way you can change the overall perspective of the way the place is drawn. Don't worry about that right now. Just work on the basic tools of using these 6 preset views and then orbiting around on your own by right-clicking and or shift right-clicking and moving things around until you get the view that you want using the cameras. So that's the basic navigation of the augmented workspace.